Hello, ladies. Thank you for joining. Hello, Mr. O'Connor. Welcome. You got to unmute yourself, ma'am.
I just figured I'd leave it unmuted.
I'm unmuted. Hi, I know Tim. Hello, I don't really know you, but I know of you.
Thank you. Yep.
You're very important.
Oh, yeah, right.
Well, you try hard and you've been doing it for many more years than I have. I don't have my lighting right, but that's all right. So I'm still working on my husband and my dinner, so I'm here.
Yes, ma'am. Whenever you're ready.
This is the last of three. Oh, on channel 13, part 2? No. I'm gonna watch this. Oh my gosh. I didn't go to- Staples.
Okay, just so everybody knows, I started the streaming early, so anything you say can and will be held against you on the internet. I'm gonna give everybody about 5 more minutes and then I'll get started.
Okay. So, did other people introduce themselves?
No, I guess we could do that now as we're sitting here. I'm Joseph
I see one
Sakalovic.
name I know, and I see one name I don't know, and the other one I know, he and I have already spoken, so.
Right.
I'm Lisa Fay and I'm driving. I apologize. I need to get my daughter to the train. But I'm
No
here.
worries, Ms. Fay. Hi, I'm Joseph
Hi.
Sakalovic. I'm a chair of Bridgeport Finance Committee, but I'm not doing this as part of the board.
Okay.
Ms. Gail, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Gail Janich, a retired teacher and someone who has been involved with the Bridgeport board through thick and thin, only for the last about 5 years. So I'm generally a newcomer. And I basically have been known to every board member because as a League of Women Voter person, when they're running for office, the league usually puts together an opportunity for each of the candidates to answer questions that come from the audience. And I've organized those probably for 5 cycles of those who are running for the board. Some, like John Weldon, didn't get elected the first time I met him when he was on the stage. And then we all know he's not only been elected, but even been the chair. So as I say, that's why the board members know me. All the teachers and the people that some of the others on this call, they don't know me as well. I'm just in the background.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Janich. Ms. Steller?
Yeah, I think nobody knows me. I'm actually from New London and I'm a former Board of Ed member there. And, our city is also dealing with budget issues. And I just thought maybe we can learn a little bit from what's happening in Bridgeport.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Cassidy?
Hi, sorry, I'm here.
No worries.
Hi.
Quick
I'm Nicole Cassidy, and I'm a parent in the district, and I have a family member who works in the district. So I'm happy to be here and learn more. Thank you.
Okay, welcome. Mr. O'Connor?
I'm just a member of the neighborhood community here in Bridgeport and wondering a little bit better to understand how they do the budgeting.
Awesome. Thank you. Mr. Langen? Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, sorry about that. It took me a minute to get my mic off. My name's Kyle Langen. I live in Bridgeport. I teach in Bridgeport, so definitely concerned about education.
Okay, who else? Mr. Hellman?
Hi, everyone. I'm Niels Heilman. I am a parent in the Bridgeport Public Schools and a member of Bridgeport Generation Now, a civic engagement group that seeks to educate our fellow citizens on certain things. And I do a lot of work with the budget, the municipal budget. So it's great to hear about the budget as well tonight. Thanks. Thanks for doing it, Joe.
Thanks for coming. Ms. Hall, would you like to introduce yourself? Ms. Bell?
Are you talking to me?
Ms. Bell, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sorry.
You talking to me, Joe?
Yes, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Dasha Spell. I'm a parent in the district and a repeat advocate, I call myself, when it comes to the kids. And I love budgets. So I'm here to get as much information as possible.
Awesome. Thanks for coming. And have I missed anybody? I'm gonna start exactly at 55, so we got 3 more minutes. So if anybody want to chat, we are streaming live to YouTube and it's being shared on Facebook and Twitter. So anybody who wants to catch up and
Someone by the name
Hi.
of Melanie?
Yes, hi, good
Hi, Miss
afternoon or
Hall.
good evening. I'm sorry, I was having audio issues. So my name is Nicola Hall, and I don't know what capacity I'm here today, but actually I'm the second vice president of the NAACP. So I'm going to stick to that, and I'm here to gather some information to bring it back to the team so we could share at our next executive committee meeting.
Awesome. Thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
I see a Melanie Strout.
Did I miss Miss Strout?
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Melanie Strout. I'm a community partner with just the city of Bridgeport in general. I work at University of Bridgeport and also just a master's of public administration. So always looking for ways to just better understand how local government works.
Awesome. Thank you for joining. Mr. Perez, we are introducing ourselves. Would you like to introduce yourself real quick?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name is Christian Perez. I currently work as a quantitative analyst with Travelers and emerging market research, and currently reside in Bridgeport.
Awesome. Thank you for joining. Ms. Scott, would you like to introduce yourself? Okay, anybody who's on the phone who's trying to speak, or you got to press, I believe it's *6 to unmute yourself. If you don't have. Okay. All right, it is 5:55. I'm gonna begin, and I'll just admit people as they come. Expecting maybe like 10 more people. All right, I'm gonna start with greetings. My name is Joseph Sakalovic. The intention of this meeting is to present the Bridgeport Public Schools budget in an easy to understand format. It will cover where the money comes from, how the money is spent, why we need more, and finally, how to better ask your elected officials for more. I will also attempt to emphasize the importance that flat funding our students' education is equal to a $10 million cut. If you take nothing else away from this presentation, realize that just because things may seem okay now, if we don't advocate now for increased funding, Bridgeport Public Schools will be facing at least a $30 million cuts to services that exist today. Now, a couple of ground rules. We don't have too many people, so it's not too bad. The only topic up for questions is the material covered here. There's a substantial amount of information to be covered in a limited time. Any unrelated questions cannot be entertained at this meeting, but feel free to use other channels. Please be respectful in taking time away from our family to serve our children. I don't think that'll be a problem here. Everybody seems quite pleasurable. I'm sure there will be questions that either we run out of time for or that I do not have a ready answer to. If this is the case with your question, please email me your question and I'll do my best to get an answer to you as soon as possible. The question times between segments will be between 5 and 10 minutes, depending upon time. And there's gonna be 3 or 4 segments. The questions will last about 10 minutes between segments. And the meeting's gotta end right about 7:45, because I've got work to do and I gotta go to work in this evening. So with no further ado, I'm gonna share my screen and get to, wait, before I begin, I would also like to take a moment at a time to help to thank the NAACP, Bridgeport Working Families Party, and Bridgeport Generation Now for helping me spread the word and get out there. Very helpful. I apologize. I'm not the best speaker in the world. I've got lots of butterflies. This is probably going to be the longest I've spoken consecutively in my whole entire life. So with no further ado, I'm going to share my contents. Okay, the Bridgeport public budget request. Can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Nice. Okay. The budget for Bridgeport Public
Yes.
School. Okay, thank you. The budget for Bridgeport Public Schools and all school districts are particularly challenging as it's based on a school year. As you can see, this budget request covers the 21-22 school year. The state and city of Bridgeport's budget run on a calendar year. This year, in light of the COVID pandemic, it is even more difficult due to school closings and COVID relief funding, making it appear that Bridgeport Public Schools is in no need of additional funding. To be clear, COVID funding is to help our children recover from learning loss and should not be used to cover operating costs. To do so would have a devastating impact. This fiscal framework is going to be the budget overview, the budget request, and grant funded services. Each of those will be covered in turn. Fiscal framework. This is going to cover how many students attend Bridgeport Public Schools, how much is spent per student, the goals of the money allocated based on school need, and why is it sometimes difficult to finance all needs. Bridgeport is often one of the two largest school districts in the state of Connecticut. It currently trails New Haven by about 600 students. This year, however, may be an outlier as Bridgeport Public Schools had in-person school, while New Haven was all remote. During the pandemic year, Bridgeport Public Schools lost 800 students to other districts. It is expected that we will gain 670 students for the 21-20 school year. This is an estimate only. Of the student population, 17.84% are special education, and it costs only almost $92 million to meet the needs of these students at an average of $26,000 per student. The average cost to educate all students is $15,329. It costs $91,739,853 to provide for our 3,449 special education students. That leaves about an average of $12,475 per pupil for our remaining students. There are also about 20% of our students who don't speak English as a first language. These students come with additional costs to service. The number is not broken down here. Net current expenditures per pupil. As we all know, Bridgeport is severely underfunded. As you can see, Bridgeport spends the lowest amount per pupil in the top 5 larger districts. Why is this? Districts are not allowed to borrow. They can only spend what is funded. There are funding disparities mostly on the local level. This will be discussed in more detail later in the presentation. Schools are funded by a variety of governmental sources, state and local aid being the largest portion, followed by federal funding and grants. This is further complicated by grant funding, which must be spent for particular uses or returns. More often than not, the services covered by grants are more costly than the grants provide for, and they must be paid for by the general operating budget. Okay, special education. Special education is perhaps the most costly and difficult funding to grasp for both board members and the general public. While these services are imperative, the more spent here leaves budget shortfalls elsewhere. It's important to understand how special education is funded and how to advocate to lower the costs to the district. As these are costs that impact all districts throughout the state, they therefore may be easier to advocate for on a state level. The cost of out-of-district special ed placements are quite costly. What the district pays after calculating 4.5 times the average per pupil expenditure, which is $15,329, then adding it to the excess cost cap. That's how much the district must pay from the general budget. In the examples shown, the district is responsible for the first $78,011 for every $100,000 spent. Advocating to reduce both the 4.5 multiple and the excess cost cap will save significant dollars that can be utilized elsewhere. Fiscal goals. Bridgeport Public Schools strives to live within its means. In fact, it is against the law for school systems in Connecticut to borrow or spend more money than it receives. The school-based budgeting model All schools must live within their budget. They cannot overspend their budget and must seek approval for unexpected costs. The Bridgeport Public Schools are audited annually along with all other city departments. It has passed its annual budgets for decades with no major issues. Okay, school allocation model. The school allocation model is based on equity, not equality. It is useless to compare funding across schools without first assessing the unique needs of each school. Higher need school will receive more money than lower need schools. For example, it will cost more money to run a school with 50 special education students than it does to run a similarly sized school with only 5 special education students. This holds true of schools with more English language learners, trauma-impacted students, etc. Fair funding means equitable funding, not equal funding. Oh. Okay. Okay. I apologize. I just hit the wrong button. Bear with me a moment, please. You're still with me, right? I didn't hang up anybody.
No, we're still here.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, yes, that's loss grant I covered. Next, okay, wait, I gotta go back to this. Fiscal goals, I just covered, apologies. So, okay, yes, fiscal challenges. Oftentimes people wonder why the district needs more money, yet does not add services. Where do the additional funds go? The answer is rising costs. Like you, the Bridgeport Public Schools has to pay for higher costs of gas, electric, transportation, and the wonderful services provided by staff. More on this will be later in the presentation. Questions. Kindly keep the questions to the subject matter already covered. If you have any other questions, hold them till the end as they may be answered as the presentation continues. Yeah. Stop share. Are there any questions?
Joe, so my question to you is that in regards to the funding, are y'all gonna reactivate the 501c3?
The 501(c) has been reactivated very recently, and we just heard about that maybe a week or two ago. So it is back up and running, and we are able to accept donations from people and have them get a tax deduction for it. Any other questions before I continue? Okay, before I move on, I neglected to thank Mr. Heilman for going through a dry run with me. I much appreciate the help. I've integrated some of your suggestions. Did you have a question, Ms. Hall?
Yes, I do. So thank you for doing this, because transparency is extremely important to us. But I have a question about transparency in terms of access to this information from a parent standpoint. So will this be shared after? I know you could always go back to YouTube and replay it, but what if we didn't have a COVID situation? Would this be somewhere on the website that parent could have access to, or this is just something that you guys are trying to do to moving forward in terms of having that transparent conversation with the public?
Right, okay, speaking of transparency, this is really Joseph Sokolovic advocate presentation and not a Bridgeport Board of Education.
Okay.
But I am open and transparent. It will be posted anywhere. Anybody who doesn't have access to YouTube or Facebook, I'm not sure how to get it to them, but I'm available online through email or whatever for whoever wants to ask me any questions. I always respond. If I don't have the answer, I'll find out the answer and try to get back to everybody.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, the reason that's not going through the board is because this is so new, and it's going to be an hour and a half. I'm not sure this format will be working with full board member attendance or not. Seeing what happens here, I might present it to the full board for the future to go through. But right now, especially with the advocacy points, maybe not everybody's going to be on the same page as I am on advocacy. So I thought it better to do a run by myself first.
Okay.
See what's what after that.
May I ask a question? It's Gail.
Yes, Ms. Judge.
Of course, sharing it with other media, what is your game plan for that?
Well, hopefully everybody watches, listens, and learns, and we can all get on the same page, especially later on in the presentation when I get to a lot of the myths that are brought about the budget and how the money's spent. Try to debunk that, and everybody could advocate from the same page. My intention eventually is to get the larger groups like NAACP, Generation Now, Faith
How about League of
Act,
Women Voters?
all League of Women Voters. Thank you, Mr. Jennings. All on the same advocacy page, because a lot of times we hear groups, we need $10 million. We'll hear a group ask for $2 million. We'll hear a group ask for $4 million, and everybody all on different pages is not helpful. If we could kind of speak to one voice with all the same information, it's better. And not everybody can listen to finance. Finance is a very dry subject. It's hard to make it exciting. I'll do my best to not put nobody to sleep. But
Okay.
I hope that.
Well, I recommend that we have a plan to communicate using other ways of getting the information out than just each of our separate people thing, because I belong to NAACP and Bridgeport Generation Now. I'm getting it, 3 times,
Right.
but we have to get beyond that.
Awesome. Yes, I'll take that as a consideration. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen and move on with the presentation. Bear with me a moment, please. Okay. Okay. Can everybody see the screen? Hello?
Not yet.
No.
Okay. Okay, let me come back in. Okay, everybody's with me now? Still? Yes.
We're still here.
It's telling me I need to reboot. I hope that's not the case. Start broadcast. I'm sharing my screen. Okay. Okay. Apologize for the delay. There is something going on here. Okay, let's see. Start broadcast again. I apologize. There's some technical difficulties going on here. Sharing my screen. Saying I need. Let's see if I can use my other device. I apologize for the delay. Don't know what's going on.
Worries, we're still here with you. I think I may take up what Gail is having. I see that she has a nice glass of wine. I may just run upstairs and get.
Sure thing. I'm gonna try my other device, see if I can get it. Open Zoom.
I'm really just a married lady. I have a husband. So if I had to feed him, I might as well have eaten a little bit myself. I've been nibbling it while this is going on.
Okay. Oh, there it goes.
Oh, good. Pretty much
Can you see?
everybody on this call is
Yep.
somebody I know. So
Good.
Awesome. All right, we can see now, right?
Yes, we can.
Awesome, thank you. Oh God, I hope that doesn't happen again. Here's the next. Now the district budget. This is the 2021, the current school year budget. And you can see we have a $256,455,009 operating budget. Wait, I apologize. I'm gonna back up. For the 2021 school year, as you can see, the state and city share of the budget amounted to $256,455,009, of which the city shouldered 26.9% and the state bore the lion's share of funding at 73.1%. We'll ignore the grant funding for the time being as it's separate from the operating costs. Why are these percentages so important? It illustrates that that Bridgeport received $20 million more than New Haven, $30 million more than Waterbury in state funds. In fact, the state funds Bridgeport at the second highest dollar amount in the state. Bridgeport receives $9,695 per pupil from the state. New Haven receives $8,670 per pupil, and Waterbury receives $8,263 per pupil. Bridgeport spends $15,329 per pupil, while New Haven spends $18,142 per pupil. Waterbury spends $15,568 per pupil. The Waterbury number is artificially low as the city pays some costs directly, most notably pension costs. In reality, their per pupil expenditure is closer, if not higher, than New Haven. Bridgeport's contribution to the operating budget per pupil is $3,571. So how could the state give Bridgeport more money, and yet Bridgeport ends up with a lot less money than New Haven and Waterbury? It boils down to local funding. New Haven and Waterbury and nearly every other municipality makes up the shortfall with local tax dollars, not Bridgeport. And this is just a breakdown of the percentages. And again, the city share, all those numbers added together are the total, 73 and 26%, as previously stated. So let's go. Yes, operating budget, the average percentage growth. Not enough money coming in to pay rising costs such as salaries, healthcare, fuel, etc. mean cuts. Bridgeport has cut more than 231 positions in the last 5 years. The average rate of growth of our budget awards for the period shown is approximately 1.14%. This is insufficient to even meet the increased rate of inflation over the same period, which is about 1.92%, not to mention the increased costs of employee raises and other fixed costs, which are much higher. This is why it is important to advocate for a steadily increasing guaranteed funding stream to not only keep pace with costs, but to have one day increase services. And these are examples of cost controls that we have taken, savings on current transportation contracts, using substitutes. There'll be more coverage on this later. Slide 20. As previously mentioned, when grants don't cover all costs, the general operating budget has to make up a difference. And this is an example of some of our grants. Questions?
Hi, Joe. I have a question.
Yes, Miss. Who's this? Miss Hall or Miss Cassidy?
Miss Cassidy.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm
Nicole.
leaving the screen share up this time.
You were talking about the total allocations of state funding by city. But isn't it true that per pupil, Bridgeport gets less funding from the state than the other 4 major cities in the state?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
If you email me, I'll send you the link. You could do the division yourself as well.
No, I don't need to do the division.
Yeah. No, because I do it every year just to see, because that's part of the thing.
I think because you were saying earlier that there's some myths out there, and I feel like you just hit on one of them, because my understanding over the years was always that, yeah, Bridgeport was getting shorted per pupil by the state, and so this is very revealing. So
Yeah,
thank you.
and Bridgeport, the state has the state has some responsibility as well to that short funding, and as far as the what you call it, the funding for the pilot funding, because we bring a lot of Bridgeport has like cities like Bridgeport and New Haven have a lot of properties that are non-taxable, and we get shorted on the funding there. So the state does bear responsibility. Later, I'm going to touch on how it's important when we as advocates are going in front of somebody that we advocate to that specific entity. When we're advocating to the federal government, we hold the federal government's feet to the fire for their portion of the responsibility. When we advocate to the state, we hold their feet to the fire for their portion, and as the local government as well, because otherwise it allows them to each scapegoat each other and try to absolve themselves of responsibilities.
Just a quick follow-up question, and not to let the city off the hook, but does that funding allocation from the state include charter schools?
Yes, it does, and the charter schools, but it's a separate stream of funding. It's a little different. They got some sort of bill up there this year to try to make it the same amount of charter schools. But the thing with charter schools is, I'm glad you pointed that out, is the charter schools receive nearly as much from the state per pupil, a little bit less, but Bridgeport Public Schools has to pay for all transportation, special education related costs. We gotta pay for all of that out of our allocation, and that's another big cost driver for us.
Thank you.
Joe, can I ask a question?
Yes, Ms. Bell, go ahead, please.
So my question is that in regards to every year, how many grants are actually applied? Does the Board of Ed apply for in regards to additional funding? And the second question is that is the Board of Ed still responsible for the juvenile detention residents education as well?
All right, how many grants, Dasha, if you could, I'm gonna cover some grants a little later, but as far as being able to answer how many grants we apply for, I'm sure it's very numerous, and I don't have that information right at my fingertips, and I will get it back to you. Email me so I don't forget your question, please. And as far as your second question, yes, we are still in charge of the Juvenile Detention Center, which thankfully in this year's budget, revenues are down because we're reimbursed per student. We're reimbursed per student, and that's one number I love to see go down in the finances, because that means less children are being arrested and detained in that center. And Bridgeport is like one of the only cities I know that got a kiddie prison on the waterfront. Does that satisfy your questions, Ms. Bell?
Yes, it does.
All right, and make sure you email me the other one. Any other questions on this segment? Hearing none, I shall continue. And this is done. This is this year's operating budget request. This is the amount of money we're seeking this year. And this is a tricky one. Okay, our total ask is $273.4 million for operating costs. We need $17 million totally to stay on level of exactly where we are today without adding a single program. That amounts to $879.46 per pupil of total need. The state budget for this current year only includes $2.3 million, or an additional $118 per student. The current ask from the city is $6 million, or $310.40 per student increase. In the current state of things, if the state gives $2.3 million and the city gives $6 million, we still fall short of our needs by $8.7 million, or $450 $1.08 per student. This shortfall, if not corrected, will be made up with the budget deficit plan. Okay, this is our operating needs.
I'm sorry, Joe, can you go, this is Nicola, can you go back, please? Because I want to make sure I have these numbers right. So when I do advocate, I ask for the right, have the right information.
Right, could you hold, Ms. Hall, could you kindly hold to the question and answer, and I'll back up to it.
No problem.
Okay, thank you. Okay, essential need. Now, we always hear, what if they give the schools 6.6% increase their request? What will they spend it on? Well, first of all, it costs $4.7 million just to pay for the well-deserved employee raises and another $3.54 million for increased healthcare costs that must be paid to the state. Then there are increased costs of pension of about $1 million, increases to special education costs of an additional $1 million. Also, there is a need to replenish the internal service fund of about $5.3 million and the reserve funds, which is normally used to cover shortfalls in the budget and prevent service cuts. An additional $2.05 million is needed to annualize new hires and fill remaining vacancies. This is an interesting number to note on the bottom. This number is a savings finance is counting on that it requires experienced teachers to retire and be replaced by lower paid new teachers. Without this inclusion, our need would increase by $1.5 million. And this slide here is just a breakdown of the raises between the departments that I previously alluded to. 26. All right, now we are on operating budget request and city appropriation. With the average need of about a 6% increase in the budget not being met for the last 5 years, Bridgeport Public Schools has cut at least 231 positions, forced our children to work with old textbooks and outdated technology. Bridgeport has averaged a 1.14% increase over 5 years. If this continues the next 5 years, the results will be catastrophic. It cannot be emphasized enough. Bridgeport Public Schools needs a guaranteed, steadily increasing funding stream to not only cover rising operating costs, but to cover increased service, but to even increase services one day. Closing the gap, as I just discussed. We are counting on a deadly virus to save us $2 million in addition to a hiring freeze, dipping further into the newly created budget surplus created that COVID created in 2020 of $3.5 million. We are also counting on a $1 million in grant funding that has not yet been approved. Excuse me. And gap resolution strategies. Position consolidation. This is a nicer way of saying less teachers and support staff. Conversions after attrition, converting to 12-month positions to 10-month positions. This is positions like vice principal, assistant principals and such. This is a fiscally responsible move that likely has no impact on the classroom and should be done anyway. Position program adjustments to save money, consolidate. Again, consolidate means make more programs and staff into less, thereby shrinking services to our children. Curriculum and technology use, grant funding. In other words, no technology or curriculum grants, no updated technology or curriculum unless it comes out of the operating budget, but that will mean cutting something else. And also it goes on to continue, a hiring freeze after March 1st in shortage area. Use substitutes to save money. Only mandated essential materials will be purchased. What this means is if somebody's teacher retires mid-year or just leaves for some other reason in March, for the whole month of March, April, May, and June, your child will be taught with a substitute teacher. Hopefully it'll be the same one throughout the time, but we've had cases where some kids had like 10 different subs for the rest of the year, and that's a sad case. What does the operating budget fund? There's a whole, I'm gonna admit, apologies, I'm sorry. And this is a list of all the services it funds. Basically, the operating fund covers basically everything except for the grant funded services. It's an exhaustive list. We could go into that later in detail or another time in detail as time permits. Now, the operating budget by percentage. The following is a breakdown of the whole dollar amounts and per pupil amounts using the 2021 confirmed dollars, just using the 21-22 chart shown. Percentage usually are relatively consistent, so this should not affect the numbers any. Bridgeport Board of Education Administration consumes 1% of the operating budget, or $2,564,550, or $132 per student. The Bridgeport Board of Education has one of the smallest percentages in the state in this category. When you hear all those high-paid jobs, just know they are cut to the bone and operating under less than optimal conditions. Other school districts have twice as many directors as we do. This is another one of those urban legends we were discussing earlier. Next up is 7% for student support. This runs about $17.95 million or $928 per student. Then we have 22% for administrative support, or $56,420,102. This equates to $2,919 per student. Finally, we have our biggest expense at 70% for instruction, $179,518,506. This breaks down to $9,287 per student. The next slide will illustrate the differences between a like district and Bridgeport and their administrative staff. Now, let's look at a comparable district and see what they have that we don't. Waterbury has a chief academic officer. Bridgeport does not. Waterbury has a chief operating officer. Bridgeport does not. Waterbury has a director of college and career readiness. Bridgeport does not. They have a chief turnaround officer. Bridgeport does not. They have a director of communication. Bridgeport does not. They have 3 assistant superintendents. Bridgeport does not. What we have is directors, which are also covered, which Waterbury also has. Okay, now we're going to go into supervisors. They got a supervisor of career and technical education. We do not. They got a district climate and attendance officer. We do not. They got a supervisor of health and phys ed. We do not. They got 1 additional talent supervisor and an assistant talent supervisor. They've got 1 additional math supervisor. They got it broken up, 1 math supervisor for K through 6, I believe, and the other from 6 through 12. They got 1 additional English language arts supervisor. They've got, again, that's broken down from K through 6 and 6 through 12. We've got 1 wonderful director covering both. They've got a research and development and testing supervisor. We do not. They've got a social studies supervisor. We do not. They have 2 dedicated early childhood supervisors. We have the wonderful Dr. Jenkins, who covers this as well as the entire ELA. And Waterbury also has a liaison to homeless people, and we do not. So this should tell you how a like district, they spend more per pupil. We are much leaner in our administration than them. All the time we advocate for money. This is one of the first things some politicians will say, well, you got to get rid of all those high-paying jobs. Now let's break down that high-paying job thing. These jobs are high-paying for us, and it's a matter of perspective. I think teachers deserve their salary, and the highest teacher's wage is approximately a little over $100,000. Now, their supervisor obviously got to make a little more, and their supervisor got to make a little more than that. And we want to attract talent. If we don't pay, we don't attract talent. Bridgeport's got one of the lowest pay scales in the city. I mean, in the state, especially in our surrounding area. I mean, teachers and other staff, they can move 10, 15 minutes in either direction and make significantly more money. Okay, now, this is 33. This is our core curriculum renewal cycle. This is our textbooks and our curriculum renewals. Note the programs that appear to be determined. Every single item we need to purchase new textbooks, it takes every single time we need to purchase textbook, it takes a great deal of thought and planning. We can't get new books all at the same time, and oftentimes book purchases come with a qualifier, dependent upon finances. New learning materials should be able to be purchased without breaking the bank and without sweating whether we're going to have to cut something else just to get our kids updated books. Okay. 34. This is a summary of our essential need. And if you look to the bottom, Bridgeport ranks 155 in per pupil spending in the entire state. Only 11 districts spend less than Bridgeport per pupil. Questions? Okay, wait. Miss Cassidy, yes. We were on the first slide with your question, I believe.
Hi, Joe. Thank you. Yeah, no, I was just curious. You were talking about, you had some ideas for closing the gap on slides, I think around 27. And it just wasn't clear to me. Are those recommendations that you're making for ways to close the gap? And if so, you know, how much of the gap would it close?
This is dependent on, let me double check. This is actually a past approved budget from the Bridgeport Board of Education. So this is actually our budget our budget request that we adopted. So all these have been adopted. All these
okay, so the gap remains the, I forget the number now, is it 8 million?
8.7.
8.7.
That's dependent upon the city giving us 6 million and the state not freezing our ECS for $2.3 million for this year, which is, we're going to discuss that a little further on.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
Hey, Joe, it's Niels.
Hey, Neil.
This is maybe jumping ahead to the end. Sorry, how much is your chest? But the mayor's budget.
The mayor's budget.
The Board of Ed, it appears that he flat funded.
Oh, he did again.
So I don't know if that's something more.
Yeah, I know he's supposed to be giving today. And, was it today or yesterday? It's supposed to be coming. I haven't had a chance to look at what he's giving. But if it's flat funding, there's going to be a significant amount of trouble down in the future. I'm definitely going to hit on that a little later as well.
Yeah. Okay, I'll keep digging.
Okay. Anybody else?
Hi.
All right, go ahead.
I'm sorry. This is Nicola. I have a question. So I'm kind of like trying to understand a lot of things. I know this has a lot to do with politics and all that. And I try to really stay away from all that, but politics govern all of this thing that we're having.
I wish I could too.
Yeah. So for example, you know, Waterbury, New Haven, Hartford, their city council has an education committee, right? And they focus on education and budget and things that affects the city education or the BOE. And I'm trying to figure out why is that this is not a part of the conversation, not here, but part of like a city council education committee in Bridgeport. Because I don't think there's such a huge disconnect. It's like we're always talking, it's the same body that we're attached to, but we each doing our own thing and then we go and ask, but I don't think they really understand, or maybe they do and there's no money. I don't know. But if I think that if there was a particular body of people who on the city side, an education committee who works with the BOE, I know I'm probably way ahead of myself, but I just trying to understand, I guess, why is that? And I guess if that's even a strategy that could be looked at to help to address this issue, so it's not an ongoing issue years later. So,
Yes, yes, yeah, you raised very interesting points. There is actually a social services and education committee that meets from time to time. And what you say about not understanding the budget, I believe I'm going to cover a little bit later on some of the things that the way the budget is presented to the city council for years and years and years, that helps.
oh, I see. Social.
It helps confuse the situation as how much money, and you'll see later the city in their pie chart says 41% of the budget goes to education, which is, I'll show later, that's not true, so I'm not going to go too deeply into that. So some of it is a misunderstanding, and some of it, yes, is politics, because a lot of people get hyped on control. These are dollars that are outside the city control. These are dollars that can't be absorbed into the city budget. There's a reason the legislator was very smart in separating school funding from city funding and having different people doing them, because the school budget being so large is an easy target to cut.
So here's a pointed question, and I do apologize. There is a committee on education and social services, so I do apologize for that. But my thing, do you guys, BOE and this committee, meet to discuss this issue and find a resolution versus doing independent things? Like right now, this is a conversation which should literally, the city should be a part of. So when we do go back to our members of, our, what do you call it, district leaders, we could always have a conversation and said, all right, this was discussed, yada, yada, yada. We need some solution. What are you doing? And are you going back to the table? So it just seems like it's too independent. And I get it, politics and all that, but it's all about the kids of Bridgeport.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I agree with you 100%. And that's something I definitely want to strive for. But it's going to take two to tango. And there's been a lot of mistrust on each side, I believe, that goes back way, way, way back. And we do need to work together for the city. And hopefully I'm gonna share this out to all our city councils, because I believe nobody gets in politics to do wrong. I mean, everybody starts off ideal, and sometimes people lose their way. But I think everybody's basically at heart in it for their good, and we can come together and work together. It's just gonna take trust, mutual trust at the table, and truth and honesty.
All right, so we're asking for $6 million from the city. So I could see my city council person send an email and said, hey, I need $6 million. This is what the BOE needs.
Right, let's call it at least $6 million. Nothing wrong with that. The $6 million is gonna allow us to only keep the cuts to forgot the number, $8.7 million or 8.3. Don't quote me on the number. Okay. But if we get more, that'll be less. And later on in the presentation, I'm going to show how it's dangerous if the COVID dollars cover any shortfall, how that's really, really dangerous. And that'll be later on in the presentation. Any other questions on this portion, anybody?
I want to ask, did I not hear you say at the beginning the federal government contribution is going to be crucial, because probably there isn't any other easy answer anywhere else? Did I hear you say that earlier on?
Well, our funding stream is definitely federal funding is crucial, but most federal funding comes in the form of grants. And I'll get a little more into that when we get into the advocacy portion, Ms. Janench, if you could hold the rest of your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Anything else on this portion, anybody? Okay, hearing none, I will move on. What's the next piece? Sorry for leaving the screen up, but I'm afraid of losing it again. Question is okay, so 36. All right, now we're going to talk about grant funded services. The Alliance Grant, Priority Grant, Title I, Title II, Title IV, and Idea Grant. These fund different things. Now I put up the authorized use of ESSER funds. Okay, I apologize. I got to back up. I have something to say about this last slide. All these grants are for dedicated purposes, and in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into these too deeply here. I will, however, discuss ESSER funding, also known as COVID funds. It's imperative to understand as there is a real great danger in thinking that because these funds are here, that the need for increased funding on the state and local level is unnecessary. As I will illustrate, this cannot be further from the truth. Now, as you can see, if anybody needs to increase the size, you could pinch your screen up. As you can see, these funds must be spent for a specific purpose and not be used to close budget shortfalls imposed by the city and state. In fact, state and locality accepting ESSER funds may not reduce their contributions to education. Unfortunately, it says nothing about freezing. These monies must be totally spent by 2024. This money is intended to help our children recover academically, socially, and emotionally, as well as to bring some of our buildings up to speed and improve ventilation. Do not allow your elected officials to distract you with this money to absolve them of their fiscal responsibility. I'm going to repeat that because it's essential. Do not allow your elected officials to distract you with the COVID funds to absolve them of their fiscal responsibility. That goes for especially for the state and local funding level, because that's where the majority of our funding comes from. If perhaps we are forced to use these dollars to cover local fundings, in 4 years, there will be close to $30 million in cuts to existing services today. Not services that we're going to add with the COVID funding, but services that exist today. So these cuts will be in addition to any new services that ESSER adds. Because ESSER, say we bring on, this is an example, this is not a current plan or anything. Say we bring on 50 social workers and add summer programming and we use the ESSER funding. Once those funds are gone, there's no funds for that. Those will have to go back. And it's really tragic because this is something that's imperative for everybody to understand. Because in addition to those cuts, we will see approximately $30 million. And if you recall from one of the prior slides, which are teachers' raises and other increases, if these are able to be hid with the COVID funding, you're not going to see the bleeding right away. But 3 years from now, when the COVID funding is gone, all the salaries would have increased $30 million, yet our budget would not have increased 1 red cent. So what does that mean? That means we're going to be facing $30 million in cuts. And that's going to be very tragic. And I hope I don't have to ever make cuts again, because that's one of the hardest things to do as a board member, is to decide who gets to keep their job, which services a child gets to keep. But it's part of what we signed up for. And unfortunately, when the budget states it has to be done, it has to be done. Okay, now you look at this slide from Bridgeport's adopted 2021 budget. And it appears that the city spends over 40% of its budget on education. Okay, wait, I apologize. I'm not on the right slide. These are just grant comparisons. I'm going to pretty much fly through these slides right here. These are just grants year to year. Some went up, some went down. And you can see the changes. And the Alliance District is one of our biggest grants from the state. State Priority Grants is also a large grant. And this is what it all covers. If we got time, if anybody wants, we can back up to these. But it's just very, very, there could be a whole meeting by itself. Title I grants, which is a lot of early childhood education, pre-K. Title IIA, Title IV, IDEA grants, special education. This is one of the grants we were talking about before. 46 is there, 46. 46, and these are just our pillars of excellence, where our budget should be focused on first and foremost. Questions? Any questions on this one? All right, is everybody here still?
Yeah. Hey, Joe. Sorry, it's
I got
Nicole
scared.
again.
I'm sorry.
I always have a lot of questions.
That's quite all right. I love questions.
So how are the American Recovery Fund funds coming through from the state? Are they going to be distributed across those grants that you just listed, or are
No,
they coming from a different source?
There'll be a different source. They're not going to be like full. You're asking if they're going to fold into Title I, Title II, Title III, for example. No, they are not. Although the grant award was awarded based on the way Title, I don't want to misspeak, on one of the title with the special education grants, or Title I grants is allocated. That's why Bridgeport's portion is so large. So it's allocated there, but it's not going to go in there. I'm still not really sure if it's going to be a flow through, but I think we've got to fill out applications and approvals for all the money that it's going to be spent on, and it's got to meet the criteria in that slide. Let me back up to the slide. I'll bring that up because I'm sure there might be a few more questions related to it. 1, 2, 1. Priority grants, grants. Comparison, state grant comparison. There we go. If anybody wants, they could make it bigger. If you can see ESSER 1 and 2 funds, the main things that can be any activity authorized under grant count categories, address learning loss, including low-income students with disabilities, English language learner, minorities, providing other leaders with resources necessary to address the needs, activities addressing unique needs of low-income students, developing and implementing procedures to improve preparedness and responses for local education agencies, training and professional development for staff, sanitation and purchase supplies to sanitize and clean, planning for or coordinating and implementing activities during long-term closures, purchasing technology, including hardware, software, and connectivity, providing mental health and services and supports, which is going to probably be one of the big ones. That's one of my pet projects that I hope gets picked up. Planning and implementing activities related to summer learning, school repairs to enable operations and reduce risk of transmission, inspection and maintenance and repair, and other activities that are necessary to maintain the operation and continuity of services and educationals and continue employing existing staff of the local education. Now, this is one that's going to be kind of misconstrued. If you recall that we had over the summer when we first closed down, there was talk of job cuts because people didn't have to come to work, and the bus contract, bus drivers, but there was a state rule to keep everybody employed even though the schools were closed. That's sort of what they're talking about there. Okay, any other questions on this portion? Okay, I'm going to ask again, is everybody still here? Because I just got my screen
Gail
open.
is here. Can I ask
Thank
a
you.
question?
Sure thing, Ms. Janich.
Did I see that Superintendent Testani has just joined the meeting?
Correct, you did. I guess he wants to hear us out.
I guess I'm glad of that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, all this information is passed through, but it's not really a board sponsored activity, but I'm glad the superintendent is here as well. Maybe you could pick a question that I don't know about. Anyway, any other questions? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to go back.
Hey, Joe, real quick.
Who's that?
This is Niels.
Niels, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I had to step away for a second, but I'm just trying to think through it. if you look at the major cities, percentage of the municipal, what's the best way to look at, municipal contribution to the education budget, right? Is it percentage? Do you think percentage of that city's overall budget? Is it, dollars per pupil? And obviously we're not, I'm thinking of like Hartford, Waterbury, New Haven.
Yeah, personally, I like to do New Haven and Waterbury, because with Hartford, it gets a little confusing with the lawsuit and the magnet schools and all that, and it just clouds everything. Waterbury and New Haven are more comparable districts to us.
Yeah.
And the percentage will tell us something, but then we got to do a deep dive. It's a little difficult to do a dive because all the budgets are presented in a different manner. And Waterbury is a little particularly troubling because not all their funding is included in their thing. Because like I said earlier, some of their funding, they fund some things indirectly that's not included in that $15
right.
number.
So that's for dollars per dollar. Yeah. Okay.
So that's something to look at, is if we could have like a.
Because I'm just looking again. I'm looking. This thing's been out for like an hour or something like that. Right. But increases in a lot of spots, none in education, means all those percentages just fell much further behind where they were already.
Right. And then later on, I'm going to show that I got a slide with the actual budget from last year with their pie chart and the percentage.
And what happened, Joe? Remind me. The mayor had the Faith Acts pledge a couple of years ago. There, thousands of people in that room. If I'm not mistaken, he pledged at least a $2 million increase per year for I forgot 4 years, 3 years, 4 years.
I guess it was. I believe it was for his entire term. And yes, you are remembering correctly. And for the first year, he kind of kept it, but it was not added to the MBR.
Right.
And it was not guaranteed funding, and we had to go again hat in hand the following year.
And what have you heard politically? He just doesn't care about that pledge, or because how did you get from there? I would have thought the worst case was given that pledge, a paltry $2 million increase, but I'm seeing zero. So any insight?
Right. I'm sorry. Continue. I apologize.
Any insight there?
Am I unmuted? Is Gail unmuted?
Yeah,
you're unmuted, but you're talking over somebody.
I was there. I saw the mayor make that same pledge. It was all a pile of nothing. He was just in a zone where he was going to say something to please the crowd. It meant nothing. You could tell it from his look.
Yeah, and I'm kind of sorry they asked for $2 million, because I believe our ask was, I think, if I remember correctly, about $8 million or something. And if it wasn't for COVID coming along and freezing things, we would have been facing cuts as well for the last fiscal year. And Nails, were you finished with your points?
Yeah, I'm still thinking on them as I look through the operating budget, but I guess the only thing I was asking, and I can ask the group, had you heard that he just was not interested in fulfilling that pledge, or?
No, I don't know.
We can talk later.
I don't know what the rationale is. Yeah, I don't know what his rationale is, and I don't want to speak for the mayor.
Okay.
But hopefully everybody will remind him of his pledge and his other pledges that he needs to be reminded of, because our schools are in trouble. Definitely. And again, and later on, on the next part of the presentation, is going to cover a little more of that. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none. So next up, we got advocacy best practices. My favorite. The Bridgeport public school system relies on a variety of funding sources. Educational funding advocates should rely on a variety of advocacy tactics, best geared toward the specific goal being advocated for. It's important to understand how much the district needs to avoid cuts. Groups should avoid coming up with its own number lower than the district's request. This is harmful to the cause. It gives tacit approval to the people responsible for funding that it is acceptable to shortchange our students. This releases any political pressure to adequately fund our schools. The ultimate goal of our advocacy should be to advocate for a steadily rising funding stream to cover rising operating costs and to expand our services. Also important to remember is advocacy should be targeted and tailored to the specific entity and funding source. For instance, when advocating for federal dollars, keep the focus on the federal shortfall and the needs that they need to be responsible for. We should not mention state shortcomings. The same holds true when advocating for state funding. Do not mention local funding shortcomings. Not following this advice allows the federal, state, and Bridgeport to blame each other for underfunding education. Let them know you as a voter will hold each of them responsible if they don't significantly increase their share of funding. Remember, advocating for education is about the issues and the children, not the group. The credit does not matter, the outcome does. When you're advocating for federal issues like the Title I, II, and the federal issues, your contact should be, as you see on the screen, Senator Chris Murphy, Senator Richard Blumenthal, Representative Jim Himes. Now, very important on the federal level and even the state level is mandates. Whenever the federal government or the state government pushes a mandate on the public schools, they should come with funding in perpetuity. And if you're gonna demand a service, you gotta pay for the service. And the services are gonna cost more. So if you wanna mandate, for instance, I'm just gonna throw something wild out there, a taxi ride for every child who misses a bus. They have to fund that. And they gotta fund it every single year. Because they passed the law, they gotta fund it. And now here's some things you could advocate for. Major federal grants, like as spoken before, Title I, Title IIA, Title IVA, the IDEA grant, and it goes bilingual. Some of these are bilingual grants. Post-COVID support, this is an important one. I'll extend the CARES Act funding to over a 5-year period to specifically generate a sustainable funding stream to strengthen the fiscal capacity of districts to provide support services to students in a post-COVID environment. Districts recognize the need to plan for funding, providing students with targeted support over an extended period of time to compensate it for the impact of learning in the hybrid model, rather than the traditional in-class instruction model. From March 20th to June 2021. They'll require multiple services differentiated by need to raise achievement levels to at or above grade level standards, as well as to foster social and emotional growth. Examples of the targeted service is K through 12 supplemental academic support, smaller class size, co-teachers, paras, tutoring, social workers, guidance services, and mental health services. Now, if we're forced to spend, if we could smooth the spending out a little longer and get some more funding, this will make it much more better for us. Next up is, where's my next slide? Okay, my next slide's not coming up. Give me a moment, please. Technical difficulty again. 53. For state advocacy, we've got Mr. Andre Baker, Senator Dennis Bradley, Mr. Antonio Felipe, Mr. Jack Hennessy, Ms. Marilyn Moore, Christopher Rosario, Stephen Staffstrom, and Mr. Charlie Stallworth. And the state funding that's required, you can advocate for these following things on the state level: the Alliance ECS, charter schools. I know there's probably a couple of charter school people on this, but legislation should be enacted to remove the fiscal responsibility from the school district of providing transportation for special education services to charter schools. Under current regulations, the school district bears full responsibility. This is about $3.3 million expended out of the general fund budget for the charter schools, and that further reduces the amount per pupil available. Another thing that we could do is technology renewal and equity. We need to always keep our devices up to date. As we all know, everybody got new devices, and because the pandemic just definitely highlighted the inequities of our school system, and the foundation stepped up. This was a local partnership with the state, and the city also contributed devices. These devices will have not a very long shelf life, and they will need to be replaced. And if we don't have a steady funding stream, those devices will be back right back into the same situation we are, going back to being a district with only 1 in every 3 students having a device, where we are now, thankfully and blissfully, a 1-to-1 district at this moment in time. 6. Local advocacy. We can see our local advocacy. We can see our local city councils here. And I don't know everybody's district, but in the 130th, you got Scott Burns and Matthew McCarthy. Their contact information is up here. 131st District, Jorge Cruz and Denise Taylor Moy. 132nd District, Marcus Brown, Ms. Brantley. 133rd District, Ms. Heron and Mr. DeFilippo. 134th District is Ms. Lyons and Ms. Vizzo Panacea. 135th District is Ms. McBride Lee and Ms. Christie. 136th District, Mr. Silva and Mr. Castillo. 137th District, Ms. Valle and Ms. Nieves. 138th District, Maria Pereira and Ms. Sullivan. 139th District, Ms. Martinez and Mr. Newton. Now, local advocacy is perhaps the most important place for Bridgeport Board of Education advocates to advocate. It is where our voting power is most concentrated and where the largest shortfalls in funding occur. Bridgeport Public Schools receive the second most amount of dollars.
Joe, we lost your voice. Hello, Joe. Does anybody hear anybody?
I can hear you, Gail. I just can't hear Joe.
Hear you too.
Yeah, just can't hear
Okay.
Joe anymore.
No. Okay. Sorry about that, of course.
No problem.
I think he lost signal.
Yeah. Well, those of us on this call, I know so many of you, but I don't know some of you. We need to do a lot, and of course, it's going to be hard. So I wish I could be very, very optimistic. I will be very, very vocal. I hope the rest of us will be too.
I'm interested to see what Faith Acts does after.
They are the most interesting one. And oddly enough, they have a good rapport with the League of Women Voters, and I think they do with the NAACP.
Yeah, no, I respect.
They have the
entirely.
people.
It's just, it's a pretty big slap in the face from the mayor to all those voters that they represent. And
correct.
They
are the movers and shakers in Bridgeport. That is astonishing to me because I have some skepticism about some of their past leadership, but nonetheless, they are powerful. So
yeah,
all I know, I need to feel good about everything about some of the charter school leanings that group has. Sorry to just put it right out there. I'm signing off. I'm not going to say any more.
Gail,
you can't help it, Gail. You're just being honest. That's what I love about you.
I'm still trying to figure out if there is a an education committee with the city council, and there's a BOE, a team of people from BOE and a team of people from the city council. Why are we having the same issue every year? And it's about the kids. It's not about nobody else. What's going to happen in 10 years if we can't get out our own way? I don't understand. Every year we have to go back and beg for money for our kids. It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, we could talk about this every day about the budget and where the shortfall is, but why is it that we can't get on the same page? If there are bodies of people from both entity under the same umbrella can't coexist and address this issue holistically and create a sustainable solution so we don't have to keep doing this every year.
Ms. Hall, that's a very optimistic view of city politics. I was on the city council for a couple of years. I served on the education committee. The education committee is pretty much where the city council puts people that they want to disempower, because there isn't really much power within the education committee, because the Board of Ed, per state mandate, is an independent body which controls everything that happens in education. So really, the education committee is pretty powerless in terms of the city council. I did, make some efforts to invite Board of Ed members in, but there is, as Joe has touched upon, a massive distrust that I don't really understand. To your point, I don't really understand why so many folks on city council, when we were doing budget seasons, just don't believe anything that the Board of Ed was presenting and think that all the numbers that we were getting from our executive departments, like, the police department, public works, all of those services, no one really questioned those numbers as hard as they questioned the Board of Education for some reason. And I don't know, my personal belief is it goes pretty deep with corruption. There's a number of people on the city council who have city jobs themselves, or their children or relatives have city jobs. And the more they try to rock the boat in terms of dismantling the mayor's budget and the parts of the budget that are under the executive branch, that, probably wouldn't be looked upon so well by the executive. So I think that that's just my theory. I'm a little pessimistic after serving on the city council for a couple of years and seeing how we repeatedly fund the police overtime, but refuse to fund our students. So it's really going to take some people power. And I see Chin's on the line. He's here from Faith Acts. It's going to take the people power of Faith Acts, of the League of Women Voters, of the NAACP, of Generation Now, of PT Partners, of everybody to really get together like Joe is trying to do, and make sure that if folks on the city council don't make these amendments to the budget and put some more funding towards city council, then they don't win a seat. But they're not scared enough right now. There's not enough people power. The absentee ballot stuff gives those folks really a cushion where they don't need to be accountable to the people unless we get people out and vote and talk about these issues.
Hello, everybody. Did I get lost for a while? I did not notice.
Yeah. Yes, you did.
Can you tell me where I got lost?
Just when you're about to get to the juicy stuff. If you're looking at last year's budget.
Oh,
you have a cliffhanger there. The issue.
You were doing a state piece.
I apologize. I did not. There should be a notification that comes up. So let me go back to the slides. I'm sorry. Bear with me, everybody. I apologize. My very first Zoom.
Joe.
Yes, ma'am.
There was a very good conversation in the gap, and people really questioning things. And so the time spent was useful.
Okay,
so
thank
go
you.
forward.
All right, I'm gonna go back to the slide. Somebody stop me to where I disappeared, please.
Okay.
Wow.
We're not seeing your slide yet, Joe.
Okay, it should be coming to start broadcast. I'm sharing my screen. Sure, one. Okay, and I actually went through the whole presentation. Oh my God, I was done.
Wait,
you
I didn't-
go back.
stop.
Right, keep going. 2 more slides.
You were left off on the part where you talked about this is what was going on with last year's budget.
Oh, geez.
Keep going. Keep going.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Keep going.
I do not believe that happened. Apologies. Thank you for staying.
That's fine, dude.
Oh yeah, this is important to us. Anything has to do with the kids at Bridgeport, you know, the NAACP standing behind that very firmly. So this is important to us.
Okay, you didn't even hear grant funded services, did you? Oh, my God. Closing the gap. Were you there for closing the 2021 gap?
Yeah, we passed
We
that.
did, some of these things you've shown, we did see.
Yeah,
Okay, how
you were like in like maybe slide 55 or something like that, I
Okay,
think.
so did you see that?
We
Did you
saw
see
that,
Yeah, we
yes,
saw that.
That
yes.
was seen,
Going.
We don't have time to go back over that.
okay. Okay, so
All
I
right,
have questions
Gail.
here.
I
So we
like
were in
Gail's
attendance.
energy.
So then we did the 2021, we grant funded services. Did we talk about that?
Yes,
Yeah,
Yes, we did.
Okay, we went over ESSER funds.
yes, we did.
keep going, keep going.
Uh-huh. You lost signal when we were talking about charter schools and the
Oh.
fund for the state.
Okay, that's the state. Thank you. I'm pretty sure knowing.
Yeah, now we're getting closer. At best practice, we did this,
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
we did that.
we were in the state grants where I mentioned charter schools. That was probably
Yeah,
likely
well,
right.
we're sort of now where we didn't really see.
Yep, we're there.
Okay, did I finish going through this charter schools and how we pay $3.3 million for special education services and buses?
Well, that had been mentioned earlier, and so maybe some
so
of
we
us
did cover
already know that.
Right. And technological equity that we're gonna need to renew. Our
Yes,
devices.
we heard that.
Okay, next. And special state grants. Okay. I
Yep,
went over the city
we saw
council
that.
part.
Yep, local advocacy, we saw that.
Okay. Also, I wasn't gone that long. Good. Did we get the breakdown of the budget summary between the districts? Yes.
Well, not because it's so small, we can't see much of it on our
All right,
screen.
this is the pie chart where I discussed where the city says we give 40% they give 40% to education.
Nah, you didn't really talk about this, I don't think.
Okay.
No,
awesome.
we
Thank you.
didn't.
All right. Okay. Local advocacy. Okay, good. So didn't lose you for too long. All right. Now you look at this slide from Bridgeport's adopted 2021 budget, and it appears that the city spends over 40% of its budget on education. This is simply not true. Part of that number includes state funding. I will illustrate this on the next slide. Okay. I draw your attention to the highlighted numbers below. The total adopted budget for 2021 is $571,936,510. In this number, the city includes an inflow of state dollars that go straight to the Board of Education. These are strictly state funds and not Bridgeport local tax dollars. When we remove the state portion of $167,238,845, you are left with $404,697,655 in the budget. Then you divide this amount by the amount the city of Bridgeport contributed to $69,040,631 by $404,697. You get a more accurate reflection of what that percentage of the budget is really spent on education. The actual portion of the city tax dollars spent on education is slightly over 17%. Removing a state education grant from the budget increases the percentages spent in other areas, especially public safety. Where can Bridgeport find the money? Well, it can go on its promises and reallocate funding from the police budget to education for one. A 5% cut from public safety alone could generate $8,657,720 for education. Millions more can be cut by reducing legal expenses connected with the inept, corrupt hiring practices. And who can forget this promise here, where the city council passed a resolution to redirect funds from the police department to education and social services. And as I was recently reminded in this seminar, the mayor's promise of $2 million per year for each of his 4 years in office. Where else can Bridgeport find the money? Bridgeport's grand list increased by $132,198,508. It gives the possibility of raising tax revenue without raising taxes on homeowners. Bridgeport is receiving nearly $114 million in federal tax money. Now you'll hear, as part of the advocacy, you'll come across this, but Bridgeport Public Schools is getting over $100 million in COVID relief. The operative word is COVID relief. These funds are meant to help our students recover from COVID-related issues and not meant to cover rising operating costs. If forced to do so, there will be extreme consequences down the line. I could already see the city budget planners setting up their mirrors and starting the smoke machine in their budget presentation. The city already tries to overstate their contribution to education at 41%, but when you remove the state contribution from calculations, it is closer to 17% of tax dollars. I fear the city and state will try and flat fund the districts and depend on COVID dollars to fill the gap. Lamont has already proposed to do so in fiscal years 22 and 23. If so, prepare for massive cuts, layoffs, and school closures. Here's why. Every year, healthcare, staff raises, rising special ed costs, pension costs, and transportation costs rise an average of $10.5 million. If in fiscal years 21, 22, and 23, our children's budget is not increased, we will have a coming crisis on a level never seen before. In fiscal year 2024, increased costs will be about $42 million when federal funding meant to help our kids recover is exhausted. With no incoming revenue for 4 years to cover these costs, this will mean a 6.5% cut to make up for the lost $42 million. This is to existing services. After gutting the system for the last 5 years, in excess of 231 positions, that would be a death blow to our children's education. Okay, everybody, thank you for joining. Any final questions? Whew, that's all I said before by myself. Are we still here, please?
Yeah,
Yes, we're still here.
Oh, thank you.
Can I put in a shameless plug, Joe?
Sure thing.
It goes hand in hand with this. So I'm also a member of Generation Now. I'm on the public safety subcommittee in that organization, and we are launching our ABC campaign, the Accountable Bridgeport Contract, because right now the police union contract is being renegotiated. I believe it was just kicked to the contracts committee. And Joe mentioned this, the city council put forward a resolution to divert some funds from the police department, but a resolution does nothing unless there is action behind it. The council loves to put forward resolutions when the Black Lives Matter protests are happening and when it's very, trendy in the news to have a particular viewpoint. However, when the public the intensity dies down, they quietly do the same thing. So we're launching that campaign on April 21st. One of the demands that we have in that police contract is limiting police overtime to 10% of their base pay, which seems to be a national standard. And that would at least provide some additional funds from the ballooning overtime over which we have no control that happens every year. And it's always between like $8 and $10 million, which is pretty much the gap that Joe is saying we need for education. So if any of you are interested, stay tuned for that.
Thank you, Ms. Langen. Next question, just unmute yourself and talk because I don't want to.
So Joe, I have a question for you.
Yes, Ms. Bell.
In regards to the actual COVID relief, since it's for the children, is part of the plan actually working on the air quality and upgrading some of our older buildings in the district?
Well, the plan is currently being developed. I got it on the agenda for the next finance meeting to have a rough sketch of any plans brought before the committee so I can better answer those questions. And it's going to be the Wednesday after spring break. So if you tune in then, you'll have a much better idea. Because you got to remember, all these funds are relatively within the last month or two.
Mm-hmm.
So the plans are in development, and I'm gonna have more information in a couple of weeks. Give them a chance to give us a presentation.
So now that you shared this information with us, which was very insightful, and I appreciate the information, what's the next step for us, plan of action? Because we could talk all we want, but then nothing happens. And I'm going to be sending out a bunch of emails and trying to get as many people involved in the conversation, but it shouldn't stop here. Are you going to come back and give us an update or something? Like, what is?
Well, yeah, well, if everybody found this useful, when I get more information on another thing happening at the next finance meeting will be the COVID related funds and how they're being spent. And again, if everybody found this useful and helpful, I could promote doing this maybe on the board level, or maybe do it again by myself, because at the committee member meetings, it tends to be a bit more verbose, and I think it's a little harder to understand. I mean, every year I got to reteach myself some of the funding streams, because it's really difficult in dry data, and it's hard. And as far as what we could do, definitely do the emails. The best thing we could do is get more people involved. I mean, sometimes I want to take the city by the shoulders and shake it to wake it up. I mean, it's almost impossible to get people involved. When they get involved and I see the involvement and the passion before me on the board, it's way too late.
Right.
The money's not there. The cuts got to be made. It's got to be, we got the next steps for us is to get as many people in public testimony as possible on a city level, hearing that the budget is being flat funded again on the city side after promises of $2 million. Everybody got to contact their city council, encourage their friends and family to contact their city council members. I mean, there's numbers. Everybody who wants to get reelected got to be reelected on their actions while in office. If they didn't support your actions while in office, you're going to have to vote differently than you did this time, if only to let somebody else break your heart. And then, because right now, we go, it's almost a guaranteed election for everybody in here. And there's really no pressure to do anything different.
Joe, can you hear Gail?
Yes, Ms. Yonch.
All right. Oftentimes I act like I know more than I do. And I want to be absolutely clear. When is the next school board election, and where are we on that subject?
The next school board election will be this coming November. There are 5 seats up for re-election.
All right. So we need to pay attention to who, candidates. If we have ideas of people who should become candidates, we need to start trying to talk them into running. You need help. The board is not a strong board right now.
Yes, and if you're going to be paying attention to board elections, city council elections, or any elections, it has to be before November. It has to be prior to the primaries.
Right. But
that's where most elections are decided.
There is still plenty of time for that. But in the meantime, there have been some really interesting people on this call, and I hope we all can kind of chat among ourselves or get to know it. If we haven't exchanged emails, we don't know each other. There's not anybody on this call that I would love to not hear from. I am only one old lady, so my powers to do things are limited. And the league is not as advocacy. I mean, I'm a Bridgeport generation now, people. Kyle and Callie and Jameem, these are people who are really moving and shaking our community. Old lady Gail is not, but I'm in tune with those folks. And the NAACP Vice President Nicole, I'm just glad to know you. I have not been. He schedules meetings like tonight, when it's dinner time for an old married lady like me. So we've got to figure out a way to get me to be more involved and informed with all the different groups. I sent my friend over here. I don't know. I'm waving. I don't know.
Yeah.
I sent a direct message because I want to get to know you. Dasha can tell you all the good and bad things about me already.
I've sent work email, personal email, and my Facebook. So feel free.
So this is my thing, and I don't care who's in office or who's going to be in office. My thing is just like a job. When you come in, there are structures in place and you have to conform to that. If we don't put things in place as an organization across Bridgeport, all organizations come together with one common goal. And when it comes to the kids of Bridgeport, that's where I stand. Love the grown-ups, but the kids is where I stand. And if we put out a statement, a very strong statement collectively across the board with everyone. And once again, this is the President Lord, who is the president of the Greater Bridgeport NAACP, and the other chair members of different organizations comes together and stick together and put a statement out. It doesn't matter who is in now or who comes in later. They're going to have to step up to that expectation, because time and time again, we go through this, and we have this conversation and it just doesn't go anywhere. And we independently do our own thing. We need to literally find a way how we could all coexist behind one objective, and it's for the betterment of Bridgeport. And that's where I'm going to go back to President Laura and have a conversation, because he's more intertwined with, Generation Now and all the different organizations, and see if he could come together and piece everyone behind this, especially education, which I'm super passionate about, and everybody on this call is. So whoever is coming in or going out, or whoever is still here, y'all need to come together and figure how to address the Bridgeport Public School education fund system. That's the main concern. I don't care who you are or who you're going to be. Let's look at that, because I'm tired of hearing about us, our kids at the shortfall, and we go through this and it's back and forth, and it's just becoming tiresome, and I cannot wait 400 years to get this resolved. I need this get resolved sometime right now with sustainable solutions, so I don't have to come back and have a conversation with Joe 6 months later about, oh, we need another $6 million in 2022, 2021, 23. I'm venting, but I'm just tired of the going around and chasing my own tail about the same topic.
Right, absolutely, Ms. Hall. And to that point is, we need a steady funding stream. And if we could advocate for a guaranteed federal, on any combination of federal, state, and local funding streams to make up for the rising escalated costs every year, we could get out of this position. And as far as elections coming up, we need to look for a certain kind of board members. When you run for a board, this is one of the most important positions in the city, and it's not just to get your name. I mean, you got to commit. When you run for the board, you are committing to attending nearly every single meeting. You got to commit to serving on committees. You've got to commit to holding every meeting of your committee. You've got to commit to putting in the work. I mean, there's, I don't want to speak ill of the current board or current people on the board, but we've got people whose attendance is atrocious. We've got committee chairs who haven't called a meeting in 4 months. And it's totally unacceptable, because if we're not meeting and if we're not putting in the work, it's not being done. So I agree with you, Ms. Hall, 100%. Except for being mad for coming to Joe, because Joe's kind of cool.
Can I chime in real quick?
Yes, Ms. Hall.
So I just want to say is that I definitely agree with you, Nicola, in regards to the comments that you just made. And those that don't know, previously I ran for the Board of Ed, so I understand the ins and outs of it. The biggest thing is that this city has the foundation of mistrust, miseducation, lack of transparency. And this is why we continue to have this revolving door. So all these entities, all these different representations that's on this call that are watching this video, the city of Bridgeport is known for not being collaborative, that we can't work together. That's not the case. This is the year that all these organizations need to come out and show up. We have a major election going on. All city council positions are up for election. You have 5 Board of Ed, you have 3 sheriffs. That is 28 positions that you are electing this year. You have city council members whose voting record has been the same year after year after year, which is continuing to flat fund education. How can we grow as a community if we're showing people that we're not invested in our kids, who are our future, and who can actually be future leaders. So all I'm saying is that I agree. I'm a person of action and talk, and I'm more than happy to have conversations with people. We can do like Georgia did. They flipped it and they still fighting. We have the opportunity to make a change in Bridgeport, but it's really up to the community. That's my spiel.
Has everybody read Marilyn Moore's Sunday in the paper? So all we know is we've got a very strong person in her who can be helpful. And Jameem Davis and Marilyn Moore are very, very close individually, personally, over time. And I don't want to say anything. I love Callie and her husband and their kids. How she does it all, I don't know. But the bottom line is we have a lot of powerful groups if we only hang together. And Faith X, I please want to make sure to mention them. Because I was, of course, that was the oddball for me, but I'm 100% on the side of Faith X. They have reached out to help volunteer certain events for the league, and I'm 100% in support of being cooperative with Faith X.
Absolutely. And I appreciate Faith X Advocacy as well as the other groups as well.
Can I chime in something real quick?
Yes, sir. Hey.
Joe, first, I do want to thank you again for hosting this because it's a big deal. It matters because, again, when people are looking at their public figures, to have a Board of Ed member take charge and saying, let's come together, let's talk about this, because, again, this is the budget that's coming out of the board. So if you were the ones presenting it, it's authentic. People know this is real. They know it's something they should get behind. But we all know how Bridgeport works. It's baby steps. So we know where this is just the start of something. I want to echo what was spoken before in terms of like bringing the city together. On Faith X, and this year we had launched the state campaign. And to hear that locally, you were like, oh, we have to pull things in locally. I was like, that's perfect, because we bring this money down and it's, I'll be very honest, it is looking really good in terms of the money coming down. That money comes down, it's here. We need to make sure we have the structure that doesn't allow it to disappear. We know this. And this is where putting the pressure on the city council comes down. We don't want to see them fluffing the numbers. Over the years, I have seen the fact that the Board of Ed has extensively gone through their budget. They have been audited. They have been doing their due diligence. And then to hear on the flip side, when it gets to the city council side, to hear that kind of naysaying over and over, it's been very frustrating. So I do think it's important for all of us organizations locally to come together and just be like, as Ms. Hall was saying, like, we all been out here fighting individual fights. This is a point of common ground. We know our city has no future unless we're invested in our children. There is nothing left. Who is going to stay? I look at my own counterparts. I graduated in 2005 from Colby, and I'm thinking about my counterparts from Harding, Central, Bassett, going across the city. I'm like, how many people are still here? How many people wanted to stay but left because of the lack of opportunities that occurred due to the education they received? Like this, when do we stop? And I think this is the year where we put our feet down collectively. It's I don't know how much longer I can talk to students and hear them talk about the things that they don't have or the futures that they don't believe they can have because they know the realities of what they've received so far. I think that after coming out this pandemic, there isn't much excuse for us not to hold any of the officials accountable. You're getting votes, you're pumping money out of the city, and you're not producing results. So it starts here. I really want to know what next steps we want to do, especially in terms of when they are voting on the budget, so we can figure out how to really see how many people could turn out and really put pressure on them to do what's right. And again, if they don't do what's right, elections are coming.
Absolutely. And raising that point, and I just recalled, it made me think that they come out also with the calendar of public speaking, and we are due public hearing for Board of Education / library will be on April 22nd from 5 to 7. They better expand those hours. And yeah, I don't know. Since I got members from each organization here, do you think it will be fruitful to meet as a group, if all the groups could get their people into one space and have a similar discussion to this. I can cut some of the time down on some of the things, or maybe go through it extensively again if that would be beneficial. And especially the local advocacy portions of what we need to go for. I mean, because we got 20, 30 in the room. If everybody can reach out to at least 1 or 2 people for the next time and reach further and further. I don't know how many people are viewing live or on YouTube, but now knowledge is power. Once people know, and once we get the education about the budget and what's been going on for years, even hopefully some of our city councilors, and they're looking at this and they're looking at it's like, wait, we don't give 41% of our money to the budget? Because I've heard that time and time again in the advocacy times. We give almost 50% of our budget. And I think that some of them are coming from a place of honesty and they really believe what they're being told. And it's just something that we got to change. Ms. Bell, you got a question again?
Yes, I'm sorry. I just want to know, is the public speaking going to be actually live, or are they doing it via Zoom?
I have no clue. I'm assuming it's still going to be via. I can't answer that question because I don't know.
Okay, people are leaving.
So I'm going to have a conversation with the president of, President Reverend Lord, or I should say Stanley Lord, who is the president of the NAACP, and see if we could have you come to our general meeting. I think the more you speak about it, it will reach the audience in terms of the consistent message, and then see if, I would love to be able to meet with everyone again from these different organizations and keep the conversation going to strengthen one universal message, I guess. So when we all go out, we're spitting the same game. It's not something different. So I support that. And I'll definitely let you know, Joe. I guess you and President Lord have a relationship about how to figure out.
Right, yeah, I could bounce it off him. Yeah, just one thing about the individual meetings, I find that sometimes, I don't know about anybody here, but I've been before some of the groups here before, but all this information wasn't covered because sometimes the right questions to be asked aren't known. I mean, what questions to ask? I mean, I think we could work something out where I could make sure the information that needs to get out, because sometimes we get distracted by sidebar questions, what I would call. I mean, all the questions are sidebar questions. I mean, if you got, like for instance, this forum was for the budget. If you got an issue with the Board of Education, the place would be for that is when I'm sitting before the board, not at the meeting where I'm trying to deal with the budget.
Well, I could definitely say that President Lord has taken the NAACP in a different direction. I don't know what happened prior to, but we've been using a lot of our time using forums to focus on the things that are affecting our community, COVID, health, vaccine, all that stuff. This is important. And this is why I got involved in the leadership part of the NAACP, because I want to make sure I stay on target of addressing these issues and getting folks to buy into it. So we've been doing that for the past couple of months, I should say for the past 6 months, and it's been really good. We've had a lot of folks come in, different visitors who come in and speak, and the questions literally are tailored to the subject at hand. So I would love for that to happen, and I'll share with President Lord, and then you guys could connect and figure out the logistics of it.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, and any other questions before I ask if there's any other questions, I would just like to tell everybody, feel free to email me comments and critiques on how I can do this better next time, because it's my first time. I've never spoken so long in my life to a group of people without other people helping out, but I would like to make it better next time and maybe a little more streamlined, other than the technical difficulties, which I don't know what happened there still. But okay, is there any other questions? Anybody left for questions?
Just thank you. I need to sign off.
Okay, thank you, Ms.
Joe.
Dinesh.
Thank you. Thank you.
Everybody have a great day. Thank you for your patience during the technical difficulties, and have a great night, and hopefully we'll do this again soon. Good night, everybody.
Good night.